Why has Paul Biya ruled Cameroon for over 4 decades? This documentary dives deep into the story of one of the world's most elusive and enduring leaders. From backroom political maneuvers and vanishing public appearances to a nation caught in stagnation, we explore how Paul Biya has remained in power, what it has meant for Cameroon's people, and what it reveals about modern authoritarianism. This is the story of political obsession, absolute control, and the price a nation pays when one man refuses to let go. In the heart of Central Africa lies a nation where elections are held, constitutions are amended, and government institutions exist on paper. But behind the curtain, power flows through one man, Paul Biya. To the outside world, Cameroon is a democracy. Ballots are cast, campaigns are run, and national anthems are sung. But for the millions living within its borders, the reality is far from what it seems. What happens when democracy is drained of all substance, when it becomes a mask for something far older, far more enduring, autocracy? Paul Biya didn't seize power through tanks and guns. He inherited it with a smile. When President Ahmadou Ahidjo stepped down in 1982, it was the textbook definition of a peaceful transition. But beneath that calm surface, Biya was laying the groundwork for something unprecedented. Instead of preparing Cameroon for a new era, he was preparing himself for a lifelong reign. And like a magician skilled in misdirection, he convinced the world to look the other way, while he quietly rewrote the rules of power. For many Cameroonians, democracy is a word they know well, but have never truly experienced. The elections, often hailed as free and fair, are anything but. Opposition leaders are harassed, media outlets are silenced, and ballots vanish like vapor. In 2018, Biya won another term at the age of 85. With a turnout so suspiciously high in some regions, it raised international eyebrows. Observers called it flawed. Citizens called it rigged. But Biya called it legitimate, and that was enough. What makes Biya's regime so insidious isn't brute force. It's the subtle erosion of public will. In Cameroon, hope has become a dangerous currency. Young people grow up knowing they might never see a change in leadership in their lifetime. The bureaucracy is bloated, nepotism runs deep, and dissent is treated like a threat to national security. Yet on paper, everything seems intact. There's a parliament, courts, and ministries. But behind the doors of power, Biya stands alone, untouched, unchallenged, and unrelenting. This illusion has been carefully crafted over decades. Unlike other authoritarian leaders who demand to be seen, Biya is often invisible. He vanishes from public life for months at a time, sometimes governing from luxury hotels in Switzerland. And yet, every decision still flows from him. It's not about charisma or popularity. It's about total control. He doesn't need to be present to be powerful. In fact, his absence is a strategy. It creates uncertainty, dependency, and fear. So how does a country with all the trappings of democracy remain trapped in dictatorship? The answer lies in understanding how Biya turned a political system into personal property. This isn't just a story about one man's lust for power. It's a story about how power, once captured, rarely lets go of those who wield it. In Cameroon, democracy is the mask, and behind it, a silent ruler plays the longest game the continent has ever seen. Before Paul Biya became a phantom president, he was a quiet technocrat, unassuming, calculated, and loyal. Born in 1933 in a remote village in Cameroon's south region, Biya's ascent to power didn't come through rebellion or revolution. It came through patience, education, and the art of blending in. After studying in France, like many of Africa's post-colonial elites, Biya returned to Cameroon armed with degrees in law and public administration, and a deep understanding of the French political machinery that had once ruled his homeland. When Ahmadou Ahidjo, Cameroon's first president, sought stability over charisma in his cabinet, he found in Biya the perfect bureaucrat, quiet but efficient, intelligent but non-threatening. By the 1960s, Biya had become director of the civil cabinet, then Secretary General of the presidency. He was the man behind the president, never loud, never challenging. To outsiders, Biya didn't seem like a future head of state, but Ahidjo saw something else, a man who could preserve his legacy. In 1975, Biya was appointed prime minister, a position that seemed ceremonial until it wasn't. Over the next few years, Ahidjo's health began to falter. In 1982, he shocked the nation by resigning, naming Biya as his successor. At first, it appeared like a peaceful handover, a rare feat in African politics. But behind the scenes, a quiet power struggle was already underway. Biya may have been soft-spoken, but he wasn't naive. He knew that in politics, loyalty has an expiration date. Ahidjo expected to remain the power behind the throne. But Biya had other plans. Within months, he began reshuffling the military, placing loyalists in key positions, and consolidating authority. The once submissive protégé was now systematically erasing his mentor's influence. In 1983, Biya forced Ahidjo into permanent exile, accusing him of plotting a coup. The message was clear. Biya wasn't just holding power, he was owning it. This transition revealed something critical about Biya. His greatest weapon wasn't force, it was time. He played the long game from the very beginning. While other leaders chased glory and spectacle, Biya mastered patience. He didn't need to shout, he just waited. He didn't overthrow his enemies, he outlived them. And by the time anyone realized what he was doing, it was already too late. Thus, Paul Biya began his reign not with a bang, but with a whisper. And in that quietness he found invincibility. What followed was not a new chapter for Cameroon, but a slow, methodical extension of control, wrapped in the veneer of civility and legality. From the ashes of a post-colonial transition, a new kind of ruler emerged, calm, invisible, and immovable. In April 1984, Cameroon came to the brink of collapse. Tanks rolled into the streets of Yaoundé. Explosions shook the capital. Smoke curled into the sky as loyalist and rebel forces exchanged fire. But what the world witnessed was more than just a failed military uprising. It was the moment Paul Biya emerged not just as president, but as an unshakable ruler. What started as a coup attempt would become the justification for decades of suppression and the quiet execution of Cameroon's fragile democracy. The attempted coup was orchestrated by members of the Presidential Guard, many of whom remained loyal to Ahmadou Ahidjo. Though Ahidjo denied any involvement, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. Biya's past was rising to challenge his present. For nearly 3 days, the capital was paralyzed, but Biya's response was swift and ruthless. The rebellion was crushed, and in the aftermath, his mask of calm leadership fell away to reveal a man determined to never feel that vulnerable again. In the weeks that followed, Biya launched a brutal purge. Hundreds were arrested. Over 30 officers were executed. The regime used the coup as a reason to re-engineer the state's security apparatus. Ethnic loyalties within the army were dismantled. New intelligence agencies sprang up. Regional governors were replaced with loyalists. Biya didn't just end a rebellion. He used it to reinvent the system from the inside out. Fear became the new foundation of governance. The 1984 coup also marked a turning point in Biya's public persona. The soft-spoken civil servant was gone. In his place stood a calculating autocrat who had tasted the edge of instability and would do anything to avoid it again. This was when Biya began disappearing from the public eye, reducing appearances, avoiding interviews, and moving decisions into tightly controlled circles. Power became not just centralized, but secretive. This event also changed the relationship between Biya and the people. Public trust eroded. Dialogue with dissenting voices vanished. Everything became about survival, not of the nation but of the regime. A culture of silence was born, where fear replaced opposition, and rumors traveled faster than facts. In the minds of many Cameroonians, Biya transformed overnight, from a transitional leader to a man who would never let go. And yet, the world barely noticed. Cameroon remained off the radar of international headlines. As long as there was no civil war, no refugee crisis, and no global outrage, Biya's internal consolidation was seen as an African problem. He had just proven the power of the quiet coup, not just the failed attempt, but the one he successfully carried out afterward. The takeover of every lever of state, dressed in the legitimacy of stability. Paul Biya didn't need to break the law to hold on to power. He simply rewrote it. While other leaders relied on brute force and military might to maintain control, Biya chose a different path. Legal manipulation. In Cameroon, the constitution didn't stand in his way. It became his tool. With surgical precision, he transformed the country's founding document into a flexible instrument of personal rule. What began as a framework for democracy became the blueprint for dictatorship. In 1996, a new constitution was introduced with promises of decentralization, multi-party democracy, and human rights protections. On paper, it was progressive. In reality, it was a smokescreen. Key provisions, like limits on presidential power and regional autonomy, were never enforced. They existed more for show than for substance, designed to impress international donors and distract the public from the concentration of authority in one man's hands. But the real masterstroke came in 2008. After serving 2 7-year terms, Biya was constitutionally barred from running again. Rather than step down, he orchestrated a constitutional revision that abolished term limits entirely. The amendment passed swiftly through a parliament stacked with his loyalists. Protests erupted across the country. Police fired on demonstrators. Dozens were killed. Biya didn't blink. The Constitution now allowed him to run for president indefinitely, and that's exactly what he intended to do. This legal sleight of hand wasn't accidental. Biya understood that in the eyes of the international community, a dictatorship dressed as a democracy is easier to tolerate. Elections were still held. Ballots were still cast. Opposition parties still existed, barely, but the rules were always tilted in his favor. The Electoral Commission, hand-picked, the courts, muzzled, the media, intimidated. Every democratic mechanism became a stage prop in a carefully choreographed illusion. What made Biya's constitutional manipulation so effective was its subtlety. He didn't eliminate democracy overnight. He hollowed it out over time. Like a slow erosion, the process was nearly invisible to those not paying close attention. By the time the system was exposed as a shell, it was already too late. Cameroon wasn't a democracy. It was a monarchy in all but name, with laws tailored to protect one man's rule. And the irony, many Cameroonians had stopped believing in the Constitution long before Biya rewrote it. After years of broken promises, fake reforms, and rigged elections, the public saw through the pageantry, but without real alternatives and under the constant threat of surveillance and repression, resistance was fragmented. The law, once meant to protect the people from tyranny, now protected tyranny from the people. Imagine a president who rules but is rarely seen, a head of state who vanishes for months, governs from luxury hotels abroad, and only reappears to cast votes or deliver pre-recorded speeches. That is Paul Biya, the phantom leader of Cameroon. In a world where power is often displayed through presence and performance, Biya has built his empire through absence, and in that void, he has become untouchable. Since the early 2000s, Biya has made headlines not for his policies, but for his prolonged absences from the country he governs. Reports suggest he spends significant stretches of the year in Switzerland, often at the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva, surrounded by a circle of aides and security. While most presidents crisscross their nations, engaging with citizens, responding to crises, and leading from the front, Biya leads from afar. Cameroon's affairs are handled like remote business transactions, signatures from abroad, decisions delivered through intermediaries. This ghost-like governance has bred a culture of surrealism within Cameroonian politics. Citizens joke that their president is more accessible in Europe than at home. Government ministers operate in a state of perpetual uncertainty, unsure when or if they'll receive instructions. Sometimes months go by with no public appearance, and yet the machinery of the regime keeps turning. How? Because Biya doesn't need to be seen to be felt. His absence creates fear, confusion, and dependence. Part of this vanishing act is by design. By remaining distant, Biya avoids confrontation, accountability, and even criticism. It's hard to blame someone you rarely see. It's harder still to organize against a leader who operates like a shadow. And in a country where surveillance is omnipresent and dissent is criminalized, the vacuum left by Biya is filled not with rebellion but resignation. His disappearing act also serves another function. It keeps the opposition fragmented. Without a visible target, political challengers struggle to build momentum. When Biya does appear, it's tightly controlled. State television, choreographed events, or brief international meetings. No questions, no spontaneity, just the illusion of leadership, reinforced by the fact that the system has adapted to survive without him physically present. But make no mistake, this is not a case of a detached elder statesman letting others run the show. Behind the scenes, every major decision still flows through Biya. Ministers are shuffled without warning. Critics are silenced with surgical efficiency. Reforms are stalled or redirected at his whim. His invisibility is not a sign of weakness. It is a deliberate method of rule. Like a ghost king, he haunts the corridors of power without ever needing to walk them. And for the Cameroonian people, this phantom presidency has consequences. In times of crisis, economic collapse, health emergencies, conflict, there is no face, no voice, no presence to guide or comfort. Just silence. A silence that echoes through the empty promises of democracy and through the corridors of a nation ruled by a man who mastered the art of disappearing. Behind Paul Biya's decades of power lies a devastating truth. Absolute control comes at an unbearable cost. For the average Cameroonian, his extended rule hasn't brought progress. It has brought paralysis. While skyscrapers rose in Lagos and startups flourished in Nairobi, Cameroon drifted, trapped in the past by a leader too focused on preserving his throne to build his nation. The cost of Biya's control isn't just political, it's human, economic, and generational. Cameroon is a country of immense potential, rich in natural resources, geographically strategic, and culturally diverse. Yet poverty remains widespread. Youth unemployment hovers dangerously high. Basic services like healthcare and education are broken or underfunded. Roads crumble. Hospitals lack supplies. And schools, especially in the Anglophone regions, are often the sites of violence rather than learning. The frustration among young people is palpable, because while their world moves forward, their country stands still. One of the most tragic legacies of Biya's rule is the Anglophone crisis. What began as peaceful protests in 2016 by teachers and lawyers demanding equal treatment for English-speaking regions quickly turned into an armed conflict. Biya's government responded with military force, fueling a separatist movement that now threatens national unity. Thousands have died. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced. Entire towns have been abandoned. And through it all, Biya's response has been as predictable as it is inadequate: silence, denial, and repression. Corruption has also become a defining feature of the regime. Transparency International consistently ranks Cameroon among the most corrupt nations in the world. Public offices operate more like private businesses, with bribes and favoritism deeply embedded in every level of governance. Meanwhile, Biya and his inner circle continue to live lavishly: private jets, foreign estates, luxury shopping trips, while millions struggle to survive on less than $2 a day. And yet, the psychological toll may be the deepest. Generations have grown up under the same ruler, with no memory of political change. Cynicism has replaced hope. Many Cameroonians no longer believe in the ballot box, or in the idea that leadership can serve the people. This emotional erosion of belief, of ambition, of civic trust is harder to measure but far more dangerous. It eats away at the soul of a nation. What's worse, the system is designed to ensure this suffering continues. Biya's regime isn't held together by ideology or vision. It's held together by fear, patronage, and the simple reality that those in power have more to lose than to gain from change. It's not just Biya who benefits from the status quo. It's an entire class of enablers, from generals to bureaucrats to business elites, all feeding from the same trough of stagnation. So while Biya continues his reign from afar, Cameroon pays the price in lost years, in wasted talent, in broken systems, and in a future that grows dimmer each year that change is deferred. For every strong man who clings to power, there are voices that rise in defiance. In Cameroon, those voices have been brave, but often crushed. The struggle for change hasn't been a single sweeping movement. It has been a slow, painful crawl, fueled by students, activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens who refuse to accept that dictatorship is destiny. Despite surveillance, arrests, and bullets, the dream of a different Cameroon has not died. It simply hides, waits, and burns quietly in the hearts of the defiant. The face of modern resistance is often linked to Maurice Kamto, a law professor and opposition leader who dared to challenge Biya in the 2018 presidential election. Kamto declared victory before official results were released, a move that shook the regime. What followed was predictable but chilling. He was arrested, detained for months without charge, and released only after immense international pressure. His message was clear: Cameroon deserves a leader it can see, a leader who earns power, not inherits it. But Kamto is not alone. Across the country, decentralized movements of civil disobedience have emerged, especially among the youth. Hashtags like #EndAnglophone and #Biya must go trend online, even as authorities crack down on digital dissent. Journalists who expose government corruption face threats, imprisonment, or exile. Protesters are met with tear gas, rubber bullets, and silence from the state-run media. Yet every time the regime cracks down, it reveals its fear of the people's voice. Student-led protests have shaken university campuses. Trade unions demand reforms. Women's groups march for justice. Artists and musicians use their platforms to highlight oppression. The resistance is cultural as much as it is political. In a country where direct criticism can be fatal, satire, poetry, and protest songs become weapons. And every time a dissident speaks, despite the risk, they chip away at the myth of Biya's invincibility. But the opposition faces enormous obstacles. The electoral system is rigged to ensure Biya's victories. The military is loyal to him. The media landscape is tightly controlled. International pressure is inconsistent, often muted by geopolitical interest. And within the opposition itself, divisions and mistrust weaken momentum. The dream of a post-Biya Cameroon remains vivid, but the path toward it is murky, uneven, and dangerous. Still, the fight continues, because it must. Each new generation enters a world where Biya is the only president they've ever known. But they also inherit the burden and the fire of those who fought before them. And though they may not have the means to dismantle the regime today, they are shaping the political consciousness of tomorrow. In the shadows of repression, a new Cameroon is slowly being imagined, not one built on fear but on accountability, not on silence but on voice, not on one man's reign but on a people's will. And the question is no longer whether change will come, but whether it will come in time. Every long game has an end, but in Paul Biya's Cameroon, that end remains shrouded in uncertainty. For over 4 decades, Biya has outmaneuvered rivals, dodged international pressure, and defied the natural political lifespan of any modern leader. But even the most entrenched regimes eventually reach a tipping point. The only question is, will it be a peaceful transition or a national unraveling? At 92 years old, Biya's age has become an unavoidable topic. His increasingly rare public appearances, his long stays abroad, and his absence during moments of national crisis have only deepened speculation about his health. Yet no clear successor has been named. This deliberate ambiguity is a signature move, keeping potential challengers off balance while ensuring that all power remains concentrated in his hands. But it's also dangerous. Power vacuums are not theoretical, they are historical inevitabilities. If Biya were to die or become incapacitated without a clear transition plan, Cameroon could plunge into chaos. Competing factions within the military, government, and ruling party could turn on each other. Regional tensions, especially the unresolved Anglophone crisis, could intensify. In the absence of a unifying figure, decades of repressed frustrations might explode. It's the dark legacy of personalized power. When everything revolves around one man, everything risks collapsing when he's gone. Some speculate that Biya's son, Frank Biya, is being groomed to take over. He's kept a low profile publicly, but has reportedly been building influence quietly. If this is true, it would mark the transition from autocracy to outright dynasty, a move that could ignite public outrage and further destabilize the country. But others within the regime may not accept such a succession quietly. Biya's greatest strength, his ability to keep everyone guessing, may become his regime's undoing when the guessing turns to grasping. There is, of course, another path, a negotiated transition, one where the ruling party, opposition, and civil society come together to chart a new future, where amnesty is exchanged for reform, where truth commissions replace vengeance, where a new constitution limits power instead of hoarding it. But for that to happen, it would require a level of political maturity and goodwill that Biya's regime has spent decades destroying. International actors could play a role, but their record has been mixed at best. France, Cameroon's former colonial ruler, has often prioritized stability over democracy. The African Union and regional powers have hesitated to challenge Biya too strongly. The reality is, until Cameroonians themselves tip the scales, outside pressure will remain symbolic. So how might it end? Quietly, with a whisper of succession behind closed doors? Violently, with a clash of factions and an imploding state? Or miraculously, with a collective choice to step into something new? History offers all these endings, but none are guaranteed. What is certain is this: no regime lasts forever, not even one built on silence. Paul Biya may have played the longest game, but time, even for presidents who refuse to let go, always runs out. And so, once again, Paul Biya tightens his grip on power, winning yet another election in a story that feels more like a cycle than a chapter. For over 4 decades, he's outlasted coups, uprisings, rivals, and even time itself. But as Cameroon's youth rise with questions and the world watches with unease, one wonders, how long can the long game last before the rules finally change? Is this the end of a legacy or just another beginning? The story of Cameroon's future might still be unwritten, but history is paying close attention.